Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I am excited to share my conversation today with Anna Howard. She is a San Diego or Southern California native, both from San Diego and Los Angeles. She did her bachelor's degree at University of Southern California, and she has been very, very involved in a lot of different amazing programs here. One related to mentoring at-risk youth in South Central Los Angeles community. She went on and attended law school at USD, University of San Diego, which is where I did my undergrad. And she has gone on to, again, really work with some important populations. She's volunteered with at the immigration clinic. She has worked in a variety of areas related to reproduction rights. And she did that before starting her own firm, which she's had for a few years here, and she really, really is very focused on helping individuals with family planning, estate planning. She is an amazing attorney, and we're lucky to have her as a member of Hera Hub. So welcome to the show today, Anna.
Thank you so much, Felina. I'm really excited to participate.
Yeah, I'm excited to share your story, your career path. So we gave a little teaser there. You're a SoCal girl. But from there, take us along. Before we even dive in, why did you decide to become an attorney?
Oh, I didn't really see that as part of my future when I was in high school and even in my undergrad years. I was envisioning a future where I would be volunteering with United Nations or helping with some sort of nonprofit cause. I always enjoyed service, and it was in a psychology class that a professor suggested I investigate the law. And I think he did so because I was questioning what the textbook said, and I was very confident in participating, and I was keeping up with the reading. So it surprised me that he didn't suggest that I go into psychiatry, but that I instead look at this undergrad class. And then I took a class on the law, and this professor said the exact same thing. But I still didn't have an appetite for law school because I just didn't think it was that glamorous. I thought that it was only about corporate law or about criminal law, and neither of those piqued my interest. I really wanted to be providing services to vulnerable communities. But from there, I moved to New York City. I was running an after-school tutoring center. I then was fundraising for a really big and well-structured nonprofit organization. But with my undergrad degree in humanities, I couldn't really support the cause in the way that I desired. I wanted to be there in the trenches helping these community members in a bigger way than just the managerial office administrative type work that I was qualified for. And that's when I had my light bulb moment. There was a firm that was getting the kind of weekly reports about what was going on and where the nonprofit needed some legal assistance. And I realized that lawyers can advocate for nonprofits. They can advocate for the environmental groups that are helping, like endangered species. They can help the groups that are representing children. And that inspired me to think more about a graduate degree in the law. I thought it would be more widely applicable than getting a graduate degree in social work because I could help the big firms, I could help individuals, I could help families. And that's finally when, in spite of the fact that I didn't really see any portrayals of the type of law that I wanted to practice, like Ally McBeal is corporate and Law and Order is criminal, I knew that there are attorneys who help children to get adopted. And there are attorneys who will represent the cause of like a wounded animal and making sure that the owner of the animal is held accountable. So that's what got me thinking about going to law school. And my whole extended family is in Southern California. So I circled back to San Diego and pursued the law.
Oh, I'm very, very glad you did. So take us along then your career path after you graduated with your JD.
Sure. When I was at USD, it's a 3-year program, and I knew that the type of law I wanted to practice was directly was interactive with families. And the skill that's required in these types of bench cases, so you're not usually in front of a jury, you're speaking directly to a judge. So the skill I really needed to acquire was writing. And to that end, I logged a lot of hours with the immigration clinic. I did a lot of pro bono hours with the ACLU, with a federal judge, helping with the memos that are like in the courtroom itself, writing memos to the bench. And I did a lot of work with the Dependency Legal Group of San Diego. They are the lawyers assigned to children in the foster care system, all of which lent itself to working with children who were eligible for adoption. But ironically, when I finished school, the types of lawyers that do that, juvenile dependency attorneys, were being laid off, and there was some restructuring. They used to be an arm of the public defender's office, and then it was turning into a private contract. So I looked into the private arena, boutique law firms that were also doing family building. And the best way I found to get jobs was to just, this was before law school, was to gently come in and ask for an informational interview.
Yeah.
So people enjoy talking about themselves. I'm enjoying this right now. And I figured if I could just learn how some of these attorneys who build families through surrogacy and through sperm donation, egg donation, got their foot in the door, maybe they would know someone to introduce me to, or I could replicate some of the strategies that they employed. And as I got to my maybe 10th informational interview, I took them out to coffee or lunch. It just so happened that one was hiring. And that's how I became an associate at a small firm that was helping families grow through alternative reproductive means. So working with a surrogate to carry their embryo, working with a couple who's donating extra frozen embryos that they had, and making sure that all the legal paperwork was complete.
Yeah. This might be an obvious question, Anna, so forgive me if it is. But what got you passionate about helping children and helping people build families?
Oh, no, I don't know, it's an obvious question, but it was just something that I grew up enjoying interacting with youth. I would tutor, I would babysit. I come from a huge extended family where I probably, if I had to count, 40 to 50 nieces and nephews through cousins twice removed and everything in between. And it's a joy, but I didn't want to become a teacher. So I just liked that level of service. I was in Girl Scouts and would do volunteering at soup kitchens. So the work I found rewarding was the work that I thought helped the community. That just really was time and time again what I would return to.
That's great.
So the firm was doing family building, and an offshoot of what the families needed, in addition to firming up their rights to the children, was the preparation of a basic will and a trust. But after a few years at the firm, we were doing such niche work, there wasn't really opportunity to do more of the estate planning, and I just couldn't see myself growing with the firm. I got more and more interested in what rainmakers look like and path to junior partnership and expansion. And a lot of firms will practice one area of law to the exclusion of other areas. And I know that is certainly a recipe for a great profit margin, but I missed the work that I was doing prior to that small firm with adoption. And I had all of this knowledge about estate planning and custody because they all go hand in hand with family law. And so I realized with the support of some mentors that it was time to look at maybe moving to a larger firm with more practice areas. And Felina, what I discovered is a lot of firms will stay niche. So the firms that were doing wills and trusts were not doing adoptions. The firms that do adoptions were not doing surrogacy. The firms that were doing divorce and custody weren't doing the family building. And I had a couple of attorneys in similar practice, well, not similar practice areas. I had a great mentor doing mostly criminal work and doing immigration work encourage me to go out on my own. And I'd never seen that as something I wanted to do. I thought you needed to work at a firm for a long time. They said, no, the longer you're at a firm, the more reliant you are on that firm salary. If you don't have a lot of dependents, if you can afford to just be scrappy for the first 6 months, this is really the ideal time to start your own practice. And we've got you. I had mentors that were going to make sure that the first 2 years of work that I was doing in newer practice areas like probate was supervised. And that gave me the confidence to just dip my toe in the proverbial pool and see if I liked being solo. Because it wasn't something that I had dreamed about in the same way that I had dreamed about representing families and representing children, through my growing up years. But what I discovered was about 2 months in, more and more leads were coming through because of my mentors and my colleagues and people who knew me as an attorney and had confidence in the work that I was doing. And it took off from there.
That is awesome. Do you have many entrepreneurs in your family?
I do not. Let me think for a moment. I'm usually asked if I have attorneys in the family, and an uncle of mine is a retired attorney, but he does corporate business law. And I have another older cousin who does business law, and they both were at firms. So again, I didn't have many examples of we call it hanging your own shingle, but I didn't know many people who did that. It was really the friendships that I generated in law school, and then in the years after law school in my peer group, where I saw people who were 20, 30 years in practice as solos who were loving it. The thing that helped perhaps most of all, a friend from a prayer group said, oh, I know an estate planning attorney who's here in San Diego. And I thought naively, like, oh, great, a competitor. She's not going to want to talk to me. And Kylie Fletcher, who's out in Poway, was the most kind, generous woman. She said, someone looked over my shoulder and assisted me in my first year of going out on my own. I've never regretted it. Anna, you will never regret putting all of your hard work and your efforts directly into your pocket. You're never going to work as hard for somebody else as you will for yourself. And Felina, I'm sure to you that's obvious and you've heard that from other entrepreneurs, but I'd never heard that before. And so I was so grateful for Kylie for encouraging me and not viewing me as a potential competitor, but supporting me and mentoring me. And that really gave me the final push, the final nugget of courage I needed to give it a whirl. It helps that with law, unlike I know a lot of folks now through connecting in Hera Hub and other small business groups here in San Diego, that if you're creating a product or a widget, there's more overhead. But with a service product like mine, I really just needed a good working computer, a co-working space, and then some support from mentors to start having free consultations. There wasn't a lot of overhead for my fledgling firm, which was great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It certainly makes it a bit easier to get going, get started. And now you've grown significantly. I'm thrilled that you're still part of the community, but you've outgrown us. You've got your own office and you've grown your team, and we are grateful that you are still involved in giving back to perhaps that next person who is just taking their first steps out to hang their shingle. I do love that about attorneys, I have to say, or at least the attorneys I know tend to be very collaborative with each other, even though looking in, it might seem like they're competitors. But I do find, and as a marketing person, I love the fact that many attorneys do have a particular specialty. I know you cover, a variety of family planning, estate planning, divorce, prenups, adoption, and things of that nature. But I'm sure even within those categories, you have specific types of clients you work with. And, at platforms like Hera Hub are perfect for attorneys to be able to refer then and collaborate with other attorneys or CPAs or, different types of professional services providers. So it's so great to see. I know you've had an opportunity to collaborate with quite a few folks, and it's really, that's what makes my heart sing when I can bring entrepreneurs together and watch them build new relationships.
Mm-hmm. It's like having a virtual firm. From my perspective, if I were at a firm, I would have junior partners and associates and individuals that I could turn to for guidance if there's something that's a little bit challenging for me. So it was critical that I did feel supported with other attorneys, even if their practice area wasn't exactly similar to mine. We would have the common denominator of having a solo practice. And so if I could turn to colleagues in family law or estate planning and probate about the legal questions, but I could turn to any solo attorney for questions about payroll, questions about invoicing, billing, what does my retainer look like, what is my trajectory for this amount of budget for the type of marketing that I probably ought to be doing to get the next set of leads that are coming in. So, and turning also, just as you said, not exclusively to attorneys, but to other women who were launching their businesses, especially when I got enough revenue going to move from part-time contract paralegals to hiring my first true employee, and all of the change that comes with having a more steady employee base and now having an administrative assistant. I needed to compare notes with Stephanie San Antonio comes up, who runs a wonderful insurance business, on the tips and tricks she learned when she was onboarding her first few employees. So that sense of community is just so helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So Anna, I have a question, and this is something that I'm personally interested in for a number of reasons, but really from a baseline perspective. I have 8 brothers and sisters, 4 of whom are adopted. My mom took a sibling group, 3 brothers and sisters, age 5, 6, and 7, in as foster care at first. And Tara, Justin, and Daniel had been broken up throughout their early childhood because sometimes it's hard to find a foster family to take 3 children at once. So she took them in as foster children and then adopted them. And then a few years later, adopted a newborn baby from a woman in her church. And I've followed some of the, things that are happening here in San Diego around foster care and foster families. Talk a little bit about what you've seen throughout your career and also where you see some of these things going, especially with the change in kind of family dynamics, same-sex marriage, et cetera.
Sure. Well, I think it's wonderful that your mom was open to growing her family through, I hate the phrase alternative means because it sounds stigmatic, but through a different path. And I think we're going to continue to see a widening of the multiple paths to parenthood. In the 1950s, being a single mother was stigmatic, and a termination of pregnancy or abortion was also beyond stigmatic. And we found more children being born, but then given up for adoption. Now we're seeing a shift. The notion of raising a child on your own is not as vilified as it once was. And there are also fewer women who are willing to carry a pregnancy all the way to term and then put that child up for adoption. So in the Academy of California Adoption and Art Lawyers, there's discussion about what was once a really high volume area of law is slowing down. But on the other hand, the advent of IVF, I mean, the first IVF baby was born in 1978, or test tube baby. I don't like that language either. But the ability for doctors to provide more by way of fertility treatment has grown and grown and grown. And the ability for same-sex couples or single individuals to grow their family with the help of an egg donor, sperm donor, with the help of creating an embryo and then having it transferred into someone else's uterus, that continues to grow, I think partially too because women have put off having children for a later age as they build their career, but then may struggle with their fertility. And so the doctors, thankfully, are providing us with different paths to parenthood. And speaking also, you asked me about just changes to the family structure. I think it's worth mentioning that our baby boomers are now retiring. I think it's something like 10 to 20,000 a day in the United States are turning age 65. And so I know in Southern California, there's a big discussion about how easily we can put a granny flat on some of these properties. With the Great Recession, there are fewer folks in their 30s and 40s who can just buy a house. And we have parents, boomers, who can possibly put a little granny flat on their own property. So I think we're going to see a big change in what we envisioned in the 1950s is like the nuclear family who buys a house in the suburbs. I think we're going to see a shift and possibly a return to having multiple generations sharing the same household. I'd love to see that take place because it can be very isolating to move into an assisted living facility if there's family available to help and to have their grandparents stay and age in place. I think so much the better.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. That is definitely important and something we've gone away from here in the U.S. of being close to family and having our children, know their grandparents and be able to interact with family members. So my follow-up question and the last thing I'll ask you before we kind of talk about what's the future of your firm is on the estate planning side, because we are, creating these unique family environments. Again, I've got 8 brothers and sisters, but no full blood brothers and sisters. They've all come through marriage and step and adopted and all kinds of really awesome ways that we grew our family. Mm-hmm. I would imagine that makes the estate planning side of things maybe a little more potentially, I don't want to say complicated, but interesting. What are you seeing there as, families think about, the future and how they protect what they've built and how they make sure that gets transitioned to the rest of the people they love?
I'm glad you asked this question, Felina, because most individuals will initially talk to me about how estate planning can maybe insulate them from creditor claims. And a lot of the discussion online can circle around tax exposure and how some tools within estate planning, can help with limiting tax liability. But I usually circle them over to umbrella insurance, which is I would argue, a better way for the average individual to limit exposure to creditor claims. And what we get into in greater detail is carving out a plan for family members to navigate the very real possibility that they're not just going to have to distribute wealth at a time of death. They're going to have to handle a family member being hospitalized for a period of time. We tend not to just drop dead. There's periods of time where people can be limited in their mobility, but continuing to have a quality of life. And we should address what the family plans to do to afford that. Are they making sure that they have long-term care insurance? Are they figuring out what asset they would tap into if somebody became wheelchair bound? And I also invite families to think about the practical things that would need to be done if there is a death in the family or if there is a hospitalization. Like what's going to happen for business owners to their email address, to their book of business? Are they going to give it to the secretary or give it to one of their colleagues, or is there enough revenue there that it would be worth potentially selling so that the spouse or the loved ones who remain get a payout from the business? What are they going to do with the family pet? What are they going to do with the heirloom pocket watch? Because these things can create huge fights, even though these same things I'm talking about don't have a high monetary value. It can create a lot of conflict for the family. And my hope is that I'm doing right by families in limiting the potential for a big conflict if there's an emergency, whether that emergency is death and distribution of money or more simply just a medical concern.
Yeah, and I would imagine, this idea or my idea of, you sit down and you put together your will and trust and then you lock it in a vault and, look at it 50, 60 years later is obviously a myth, right? Because these need to be living, breathing documents because things are changing.
Absolutely. They don't need to be updated on an annual basis. Hopefully, people write the estate plan in such a way that it can, stay as is for a good 5-10 years. Mm-hmm. But what we also see as a trigger for changes, not just the family dynamic changing, there's new children that are getting born, or there's a divorce, or there's assets being purchased. But sometimes it comes from the government. Selena, have you ever heard of a HIPAA release?
Yes, I have.
A HIPAA release, for those who aren't as familiar with the document, it essentially allows loved ones to read the medical records of a patient. If the patient can't sign a consent form, if they have a HIPAA release in advance, their family can read the medical records as they go from hospital A to hospital B. But in the 80s and 90s, we didn't have that document. So hopefully around 2002, 2004, when HIPAA releases came out, their estate planning attorney said, hey, come back in, let's sign this new HIPAA release. I expect that in the next decade, there's probably going to be some other similar type change to the healthcare industry or the tax code that would warrant some changes to people's estate plans, even if their family somehow hasn't had a change in structure.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Well, Anna, what are some of the things you're looking forward to in 2020? What's on the horizon for your business?
I just heard a snapshot of a great book that kind of spells out marketing plans and how to design one. I've always heard of the importance of creating a business plan, but I'd never really put pen to paper on a really strategic marketing plan. So I've got some ideas about webinars and client appreciation events and a structured way to carry those out. But I'm also excited to brainstorm the 5-year plan and what that's going to look like, how to celebrate this. I think I'm at the 6th or 7th anniversary of my firm, and really carve out a path to hiring an associate and onboarding them for junior partnerships. So putting some specifics and some goal steps in place to get there.
Exciting. You're growing. Well, you are such an inspiration, Anna. It's been so fun to watch you grow from the day you showed up at Hera Hub to seeing you now in your own space and employees. Just so proud of you.
Well, I don't know that I would have had all this growth and success if I couldn't look to other women business owners like you that were doing it and achieving it. So I'm just glad to be part of the community and hope I can pay it forward.
Thank you. Well, Anna, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Email, phone. You can find my contact information on my website, achowardlaw.com. A for Anna, C for Kathleen, HOWARDLAW.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Selena.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.